Hello, world, and welcome to this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. I'm Blaze Stewart, architect at Winelect, and today we're going to be looking at config maps with Kubernetes. Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at config maps on Kubernetes. Now, a config map on Kubernetes is a basic concept that allows you to have different configurations for different kinds of resources on Kubernetes that are separate from the manifest files themselves. So what a config map does is it allows you to create a file essentially that has a bunch of key value pairs in it, and then you can apply that file to a Kubernetes cluster, and then those key value pairs will be stored in the local database on Kubernetes. Then when you go to deploy your resources, those values can be read out of that local database and applied to the pods that you're deploying into your Kubernetes environment. What this allows you to do is have different kind of configurations for different kind of environments. So if I was wanting to deploy to dev, QA, and production, I can use a different config map for each one of those different environments, but use the same manifest file for each of those environments. So if you're not using something like secrets to inject secret information, you can use config maps to do non-sensitive data. So let's look at a basic example of how this would work, and then let's go ahead and deploy that and a basic demo, and you'll see how it works. It's not very hard to do, so this is going to be a very short video for that reason. So I'm here inside of a text editor, and we're looking at a config map. This is really all there is to a config map. It's got a API version. It's got the kind of resource that I'm deploying, in this case, a config map. I've got metadata about what it is. In this case, I need a name for it because the name will be used to reference this particular config map in other kinds of manifest files. And then here we have this data section. Now, a typical manifest file on Kubernetes will have a spec right here, but a config map uses a data section. And this is where you can put one or more key value pairs. So if I wanted to have a different key value pair, I can apply that here. So database name, username, or something like that. And I could do like, I don't know, let's say Blaze for that particular key value pair. And I can do as many of these as I need to. So these are the key value pairs that get written to that local database. So with that, I can save this particular values here and save this config file, and I can apply it. But before we apply this, let's look at the actual manifest that's going to be using it. So here's my WordPress installation file that we've looked at before, and this is one we've used in other demos as well. I've modified it to use a config map, and really the only thing I'm looking for is a database password because everything else is localized to this particular instance of WordPress. So down here inside of my container spec here for each of my deployments, I have a value here that's being injected as an environment variable that I'm getting out of my config map. Now, in a real live demo, I probably wouldn't be using a password for a value that I'm putting in an environment variable by way of a config map, but I'm using it for demonstration here. But here I am able to read that config map reference out of the config map that I'm going to deploy to Kubernetes by telling it what the name of my config map is. Then I'm going to tell it what key that I want to read. And in that case, that's going to be DB password. And then it'll get that value from that key value pair and assign it to this environment variable here. And that environment variable then is used by the actual container to deploy this instance of MySQL. Similarly, down here inside of my WordPress deployment, I have a similar thing going on where I have an environment variable called the WordPress underscore DB password, and then I'm getting the same reference from the same config map here. So it's reading the same reference from that same config map that allows me to use a single config map for both of these values. So with this in mind, let's go over and deploy this guy using the kubectl, and I will deploy it to a cluster that I've already built up in Azure. Now I'm here inside of my PowerShell session, and I've already connected this to my cluster. So I'm going to run a couple of commands to create my config map on Kubernetes. And I use the same basic commands that I use to create resources. So I do kubectl apply, then from file, and then I put in the name of the file that I'm going to deploy. So in this case, configmap.yaml. That's the name of the file that I have, and it's going to create a config map /WordPress. Now, there are other ways to create these on Kubernetes. This is the one that I prefer simply because it's using very similar syntax. In fact, I could actually put that same config map in line with my manifest file and use it there. But for the purposes of separating configuration from the deployment, I've used a separate file here. So now that has been put into my config map inside of my Kubernetes cluster, I should be able to do kubectl get config map, and it will list the config maps I have available here. And there's the one that I have. And if I want to use a describe on this, it should show me the values that are a part of that config map. And this will show me the things that I have going on here. So here is the data that was assigned to that. So DB password 1, DB username Blaze. And this is the data that I put into this that I can now reference as a part of my manifest file that I'm going to deploy when I deploy WordPress. So now that I have my config map created, I can do kubectl apply -f from my WordPress YAML that's going to deploy my WordPress instance. Now, if this all works, then I should be able to get the service IP address from my service, then go to the endpoint that is exposing, and then I should be able to see my WordPress instance get created without being prompted for database credentials. So that's the test to know that this is actually working. However, I can actually just do some quick look around on this too, as if I want to. So I can go kubectl get pods, and I should see the pods running here. And if I do a describe on this, if I do describe pods here, I can get some details about this particular pod, and I should be able to see where it's referencing the secret, or not the secret, the data from the config map here. The key has been set from DB password from the config map WordPress, and there you see that's where it's getting that value from for the environment. So if all goes well, I should be able to use that value that I inserted for both the database and for the actual WordPress instance. So let's get the service here, and that I need the IP address so I know what to use in my browser. So there is my endpoint there. Let's copy and paste that, and let's get an instance of Chrome up, and then we'll put that in there. Now Chrome's up and running. Let's go over to the address bar and punch in that, and let's see if this pulls up WordPress. All right, I didn't get prompted for database credentials yet. I will select my language here, and so it's going to take me right to the site configuration. So I didn't get prompted for database credentials here. So I can then configure my site, and I can use the username and password that is so secure here, and then I can confirm it's a weak password, and I can install WordPress, and this will go through the process of creating the database and then spinning up my application on Kubernetes. And then I can go to the login, and I can type in that super secure password that I had, and should be able to pull up the admin panel. As you can see here, it's already up, and then I should be able to pull up the website as well. So here, again, another WordPress demo that is using a different aspect of Kubernetes to configure WordPress, but it would apply to just about any application that you have running on Kubernetes. You can use config maps to configure those independent of the actual manifest file that's deploying it. So next time we're going to look at Helm and how to develop Helm charts from Kubernetes manifest files. It's another interesting topic on Kubernetes, and that will give us some more flexibility and be able to do things like package management with Kubernetes. So thanks for watching this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. If you like this content, please consider visiting us online at www.wintellect.com, and there you can find about services that Wintellect offers, including training and consulting services. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon to get notifications when new content becomes available, and also comment down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at @TheOneMule, and also follow Wintellect on Twitter at WintellectNow or at Wintellect. We are constantly posting things about Azure-related technologies and things related to software development. You can also reach us by email at consulting@wintellect.com. Until next time, thank you.